Hi there. Welcome back to our channel. Today's interview questions and answers session is dedicated to the various mainframe technologies, such as JCL, COBOL, CICS, VSAM, and DB2. Each interview question is explained with an example. These mainframe interview questions include scenario-based questions for better understanding. Let's get started with today's agenda. We start today's session with JCL interview question. Then we will deep dive into COBOL interview questions and answers. Then we will discuss CICS interview questions and answers. We will end today's session with DB2 interview questions. Please consider subscribing to our channel and smash the like button. And don't forget to share this video because we need your support to grow our channel. Let's get started with JCL interview questions. The term JCL stands for Job Control Language. Job Control Language is a set of statements that you code to tell the ZOS operating system about the work you want it to perform. JCL statements tell ZOS where to find the appropriate input, how to process that input, that is, what program or programs to run, and what to do with the resulting output. JCL has three main types of control statements. First one is job statement, to identify the unit of work the operating system is to perform. Second one is exec statements, depending on the number of job steps within the job. And third one is DD statements, to identify the input and output datasets. Now, let's get started with top 10 JCL interview questions with answers. How is the joblib statement different from the steplib statement? Joblib statement and steplib statements are generally used to specify private libraries. If you want to execute a program from a private library that is other than system library, then you can specify your private library as a job library or a step library. To specify a job library that applies to an entire job, you code a DD statement using joblib as the DD name. It must be the first JCL statement, following a job statement. To specify a step library that applies to only one step in a job, you code a DD statement, named steplib, after the exec statement for that step. Important point, if your JCL has both joblib and steplib DD statement, then the step library is searched first, followed by the system libraries. The job library is ignored for the job step. Can you define the term GDG? A generation data group, or GDG, is a collection of two or more chronologically related versions of the same dataset. They are generally used to maintain critical data backups. Each file in the GDG can be referred to as a generation dataset. You can use +0 to refer current generation dataset, +1 to create a new generation dataset, and -1 to refer previous generation dataset. What are the different types of control statements in JCL? Job Control Language, JCL, has the following type of control statements. First one is job control statement, that is, job card. Second one is execute control statement, that is, exec statements. Third one is DD control statements, that is, DD statements. Let's say the mainframe job, JCL, has 5 different steps to calculate monthly tax. The job failed at the second step. How to restart the job from the second step? The JCL restart parameter is used to restart the job from a specific statement. JCL restart parameter is an optional keyword parameter. You can use the JCL restart parameter to designate the procedure step, checkpoint, JCL step, at which the system has to restart a job. What is conditional processing of JCL? Conditional processing is a technique through which you can skip or execute steps in a JCL. The conditional parameter is generally used in JCL for conditional processing. You can use the JCL cond parameter on both the job control statement or execute control statement. The following is the syntax of JCL cond parameter. Can you explain the disposition of new catalog delete? In JCL, the disposition parameter is a keyword parameter. It is used to specify the status of the datasets. JCL disposition indicates the system what to do with the dataset in case the job fails or is completed. The monthly tax calculation job, that is JCL, failed with SD37. What would be the possible fix? The append SD37 indicates that the dataset is out of space. The append indicates that all of the primary allocated space has been used up, and there is no secondary space in the allocation to continue to write data to the output file. You should allocate more space and restart the job after carefully reviewing the job steps. What is the significance of the region parameter in a JCL? When a job step begins, the system allocates a region of storage space that's large enough to hold the program and any required control blocks. As the program executes, it can enlarge its region by acquiring additional storage. You can use the region parameter on a job or exec statement to control the maximum amount of storage that can be acquired for a job step's region. Although the system also allows you to code region equals 0k or region equals 0m to allocate all available storage. What is the significance of JCL cond equals even? The cond parameter is used for the conditional processing of the JCL. You can code the even subparameter to specify how an append affects job step execution. Cond equals even parameter executes the JCL step, even if any of the previous steps terminated abnormally. What is the significance of JCL cond equals only? JCL cond parameter is used for the conditional processing of the JCL. You can code the only subparameter to specify how an append affects job step execution. Cond equals only parameter executes the step only if any of the previous steps terminated abnormally. What is the purpose of the JCL parm parameter in the exec statement? The JCL parm parameter is a method to pass data from the JCL to the COBOL program or any other program. The maximum length of the JCL parm parameter is 100 bytes, that is, 100 characters. The parameter is specified at exec statement. The following JCL parm parameter example explains how to pass data from JCL to a COBOL program. What is the importance of the region parameter in JCL, and on which JCL control statement you can define it? The region parameter in JCL sets the value of central or virtual storage that the step requires. When a job step begins, the system allocates a region of storage space that's large enough to hold the program and any required control blocks. As the program executes, it can enlarge its region by acquiring additional storage. You can use the region parameter on a job or exec statement to control the maximum amount of storage that can be acquired for a job step's region. Although the system also allows you to code region equals 0k or region equals 0m to allocate all available storage. What is the application of the time parameter in JCL? The time parameter in JCL is used to define the maximum amount of time that a mainframe job may use the CPU processor. The mainframe system terminates the job if it exceeds the defined time limit. You can specify the time parameter on both the job and exec statements. If the time parameter is in the job card, then it is applicable to the entire job. But if it is defined in the exec statement, then it relates to the job step. What is the difference between the data definition name, that is DD name, and dataset name, that is DSN name? Well, the DSN name is used to provide the physical dataset name. However, DD name, that is, data definition name, is an 8-character logic name, corresponding to the actual dataset name. DD name begins after the //. In the COBOL programs, the DD name is used to perform I/O operations. What is the dummy dataset in JCL, and how to allocate a dummy dataset in JCL? A dummy dataset is a dataset that doesn't exist. Instead, the system simulates the dataset allowing a program to process the file without actually having the file present. There are two ways to specify a dummy data set on a DD statement. You can code the dummy parameter, or you can specify DSN name equals null file. Dummy is a positional parameter and, if coded, must be the first parameter on the DD statement. What does the keyword DCB mean, and what are some of the parameters? The term DCB stands for Data Control Block. It is a keyword for the DD statement, and it is used to describe data sets attributes. The parameters associated with it DCB are block size, logical record length, and record format. How to create a temporary dataset in JCL. In JCL, you have the facility of creating a temporary dataset. As the name suggests, the temporary dataset in JCL is created and removed in the same mainframe job. The temporary dataset in JCL is created in the following ways. What is the difference between IDCAM's repro, IEBGener, and IEBcopy utility? Well, IEBGener, IDCAM's repro, and IEBcopy are data copy utilities, which is widely used on mainframe. However, the application of each utility is different. IEBGener utility in JCL is generally used to copying sequential datasets PDS or PDSE member. You can also apply filter criteria, change logical records length and block size of a dataset, and generate records. IEBcopy utility in JCL is generally used to merge or copy members between one or more PDS, that is, partitioned datasets, or PDSE, that is, partitioned datasets extended. IDCAM's repro in JCL is generally used to copy sequential datasets. It is primarily used while dealing with VSAM datasets. What is the difference between static call and dynamic call? In the case of static call, the called program and the calling program are part of the same load module. The called program always resides in the main memory. The compiler option is no-dynam. In a dynamic call, the called program is compiled and stores separately. The called program is loaded into the main memory when it is required. The compiler option is dynam. What is the difference between in-stream procedure and catalog procedure? The in-stream procedure in JCL is a set of statements that is written between proc and PEND statement. You can invoke the in-stream procedure by the JCL exec statement. The catalog procedure in JCL is a series of JCL control statements that are stored in a partition datasets or procedure library. You can invoke catalog procedure from any JCL by using exec statements. Let's get started with COBOL interview questions and answers. The term COBOL stands for Common Business Oriented Language. It is a high-level programming language, and it is used to develop business-oriented applications. COBOL is one of the oldest and extensively used programming language. COBOL has always maintained a low profile. But COBOL dominates enterprise computing for the last 60 years. Now, let's get started with top 10 COBOL interview questions with answers. What is the difference between copy and call statements? COBOL copy statement is used to include or copy pre-written code into the COBOL program. COBOL call statement transfers control from one program to another. The main program, containing the call statement that references or calls a program, is referred to as the calling program. If you want to learn more about COBOL copy or COBOL call statement, then watch our COBOL call statement video. What is the purpose of the program ID, and in which division it is defined? Program ID parameter is defined in the identification division. It is used to specify the name of the COBOL program. It can consist of 1 to 30 characters. The following example illustrate the identification division. How many divisions does a COBOL program contain? Can you name each divisions? A COBOL program has 4 divisions. First one is identification division. Second one is environment division. Third one is data division. And the fourth one is procedure division. Here is a sample program to illustrate how each division is outlined in a COBOL program. If you want to learn more about COBOL program structure, then watch our COBOL program structure video. What is the difference between a level 77 item and a level 01 item with no subordinate levels? Well, the two items are functionally the same. Both are elementary level items. If the 01 level does not have any subordinate items. If 01 is defined as a group field, then it would be different from level 77. The following example illustrate both level items. When using declarative, can you perform another paragraph within the declarative area? Yes, you can have a common error paragraph within the declarative that is executed. However, you must not perform any paragraph outside the declarative. Which COBOL statement is coded to update the record in a sequential file? What is specified with the statement, the record description, or the file name? The COBOL rewrite statement is used to update the record. The record description is specified in the COBOL rewrite statement instead of the file name. The following example illustrate the use of COBOL rewrite statement. In which mode you must open a file to update the record in the file. If you want to update data in the file, then it should be opened in I/O mode, that is, input-output mode. Make sure you read the record from the file before updating the record in the file. The following example illustrate COBOL open statement. Is the @end clause valid when issuing a random read? No. Because you are reading records directly, you will never read till the end of file. You can, however, code the invalid key clause to detect exceptions such as record not found. That is file status 23. The following example illustrate COBOL random read from the file. If a file is defined as optional and it doesn't exist, which file status is returned? If the file is opened in the input mode? What about the output mode? The input file status code would be 05. It means an open statement was successfully executed, but the referenced optional file was unavailable at the time the open statement was executed. The output file status code would 00. How you read the record from the file. And what must be done before you can read records from a file. The record from the file is read by using the COBOL read statement. You should open the input file in the desired mode before reading records from the file. You should use the COBOL open statement to open the file. The following example illustrate the COBOL open statement. What is the initialize verb in COBOL? And what is the difference between COBOL initialize and COBOL move space statement? Initialize verb in COBOL is used to initialize the variables with the default value, that is, space or zeros. An initialize statement is functionally equivalent to one or more move statements. Generally, the COBOL initialize statement is used to initialize all the group data items without any hassle. However, it is unproductive to initialize an entire group, unless you require all the items in the group to be initialized. In COBOL, alphabetic, alphanumeric fields, and alphanumeric edited variables are set to spaces. However, numeric edited items are set to 0. Finally, the filler occurs depending on items left intact. What is the difference between levels 66, 77, and 88, and what are they used for? Levels 66, 77, and 88 are functionally different and are used for different purposes. Level 66 is a rename clause and is used for rename items. Level 77 is an elementary level item. It cannot have group items. Level 88 is used to specify the condition name. What is the difference between index and subscript in COBOL? The subscript and index in COBOL are used to access elements from the array. The subscript in COBOL refers to the array occurrence. However, an index in COBOL is the displacement of an item from the beginning of the array. An index in COBOL can only be changed by using COBOL perform statement, COBOL search, and set statement. You must always use an index for a table to use COBOL search or COBOL search all statements. What is the difference between COBOL search and search all statement? The COBOL search and COBOL search all statement are used to search data within the array. COBOL search is a serial search. However, COBOL search all is a binary search, and it is faster and efficient as compared to search. The data in table/array should be sorted either in ascending or descending before using COBOL search all. What should be the sorting order for COBOL search all statement? The data in the COBOL array should be sorted in a specific sequence. That is, either ascending or descending. The default data sorting order is ascending. If you need to search the data in descending order, you must use descending key clause while declaring the array. What is the basic difference between performing a section and a paragraph in COBOL? The COBOL perform statement is used to execute a business logic defined in the paragraph or section. Performing a section means executing a group of paragraphs within the section. However, performing a paragraph means executing a particular paragraph logic. What is the COBOL evaluate statement and why it is recommended over the COBOL if else statement? The COBOL evaluate statement is like a case statement and can be used instead of nested if statements. COBOL evaluate clause is better than nested ifs in terms of performance. It saves a lot of CPU and simplifies the program logic. It is not possible to replace all nested ifs in the program. But you should try to replace as much as you can. You can use the evaluate statement instead of a series of nested if statements to test several conditions and specify a different action for each. It is always recommended to use COBOL evaluate instead of nested ifs. What is the difference between COBOL continue statement and COBOL next sentence statement? In general, both the COBOL continue statement and COBOL next sentence are used to transfer control to the next executable statement. But there is a difference in the way control is transferred. The next sentence transfer control to the next executable statement after a period that is dot. But the continue statement transfer control after the explicit scope terminator that is end if, and evaluate, etc. Is it possible to redefine an x of 50 with a field of x of 100? Yes, it is possible. COBOL redefine statement is used to define the same field in two or more ways. It means that definition and the redefinition of both fields refer same storage. What is the difference between comp and comp3? And how is sign stored in comp3 fields? Both comp and comp3 in COBOL are used to define the storage format of numerical fields. Comp in COBOL represents the binary format, while comp3 in COBOL represents the packed decimal format. In comp3 the sign is stored in the last nibble. For example, if your number is plus 100, then system will stores hex 0c in the last byte. Let's get started with CICS interview questions and answers. The term CICS or CICS stands for Customer Information Control System. It is a general-purpose transaction processing subsystem for the ZOS. The CICS has evolved over the years since it was first introduced in 1968. At that time, it ran only on IBM mainframes and in a limited capacity. Today, CICS can be used on a variety of platforms and with several different programming languages. And with the introduction of IBM's CICS Transaction Server, CICS became the premier server for Internet applications. CICS is a world-class transaction processing system. As such, it can handle billions, yes, billions of online transactions every day for banks, airlines, insurance companies, hospitals, e-business sites. CICS process more than 1.1 million transactions per second, that's 100 billion transactions in a day. CICS is probably the most successful piece of software of all time. It is the backbone of business computing throughout the world. Millions of users unknowingly activate CICS every day. Now, let's get started with top 20 CICS interview questions. What are the common control tables used in CICS. The following tables are commonly used. Program Control Table, PCT. It defines each transaction, containing a list of valid transaction identifiers, that is, trans ID, where each transaction is paired with its matching program. Program Processing Table, PPT. It contains a list of valid program names and maps, and whether a current version is in the CICS region, or needs to be brought in as a new copy. File Control Table, FCT. It contains a list of files known to CICS, the dataset name and status, that is, closed or open, enabled or disabled. Terminal Control Table, TCT. A list of the terminals known to CICS. What tables must be updated when you are required to add a new transaction and program? Well, at a bare minimum, the Program Control Table, PCT, and Program Processing Table, PPT, must be updated. What is the significance of sync point command? The sync point command ends a logical unit of work and causes a sync point to occur. A sync point command finalizes the updates to protected resources so they aren't backed out if an event occurs. You can use the rollback option of the sync point command to reverse any changes made to that point in a logical unit of work. Remember, if you omit the sync point command, a sync point occurs when the task ends. What do the terms locality of reference and working set mean? These terms refer to CICS efficiency techniques. Locality of reference required that the application program should consistently reference instructions and data within a relatively small number of pages. However, the working set is the number of program pages needed by a task. What is the significance of map-only and data-only options? In the send map command, map-only option sends only constant data from the physical map, so you don't have to code the from option. In the second case, only the data in the symbolic map is sent. Data-only option sends only data from the from area, so no constant data from the physical map is sent. Remember, if neither option is specified, both the constant data in the physical map and the data in the from area are sent. What is the CECI in CICS? CECI is the command level interpreter. You can use it to issue CICS commands from outside a program. You might want to use it to issue a send map command to test a map before you've written the program that will process it. You might also use it to update the contents of a file, so you don't have to write a special purpose program to do that. What is EDF? EDF is the Execution Diagnostic Facility. It is an online debugging tool that lets you trace the progress of a CICS program as it executes. What is CEBR? CEBR lets you browse the contents of a specific temporary storage queue. What is a logical message in CICS? A logical message is a single unit of output created by send text or send map commands. BMS collects the separate output from each command and treats them as one entity. This technique may be used to build CICS reports. What are the CICS commands associated with temporary storage queue processing? The following command are used for temporary storage queue processing: write QTS, read QTS, and delete QTS. What are the CICS commands associated with transient data queue processing? The following commands are used for transient data queue processing: write QTD, write data to transient data queue; read QTD, read data from the transient data queue; delete QTD, delete all transient data. ENQ and DEQ command is used to reserve a queue for exclusive use so that other tasks can't access it at the same time. What is the meaning of the ENQ and DEQ commands? The ENQ command reserves any user-defined resource for the specific task. For enqueued transient data, no other task will be able to write records to it for as long as it is enqueued. The DEQ command removes the lock. What is static cursor positioning? Whenever you issue a send map command, you should make sure that the cursor is positioned properly. By default, CICS places the cursor in the top left corner of the screen. But if you code IC parameter in the map field, defined by using DFH MDF macro, then the cursor will be positioned in that field. This method of cursor positioning is called static cursor positioning. Remember, if you specify IC for more than one map field, CICS positions the cursor in the last one on the screen. What CICS command would you use to read a VSAM KSDS sequentially in ascending order? Read next command reads the next record from a browse operation for any of the 3 VSAM files. How do you get data from a task that began with a start command? The retrieve command is used to get data from a task that began with a start command. What is interval control, and what are some of the CICS commands associated with it? CICS interval control provides a variety of time-related features, such as ask time command, request current date and time of day, format time command, transform absolute date and time into a specified format, start command, start a task at a specified time, retrieve command, retrieve data stored for a task, cancel command, cancel interval control requests. What is task control, and what are the CICS commands associated with it? Task control refers to the CICS functions that manage the execution of tasks. Task control commands are suspend, enq, and deq. What is the abend command, and when would you use it? The abend command forces a task to end abnormally. It creates a transaction dump and invokes the dynamic transaction backout. What is the difference between exec CICS, XCTL, and exec CICS start commands? The XCTL command transfers control to another application having the same trans ID, but the start command initiates a new transaction. The XCTL continues the task on the same terminal while the start can start a task on another terminal. What is the difference between exec CICS, XCTL, and exec CICS link commands? The XCTL command transfers the control to an application program of the same level, and the control will not come back. While the link passes control to an application program at the next, lower logical level, and expects the control back. What happens to resources supplied to a transaction when an XCTL, or link is executed? With XCTL, the working storage and the procedure division of the program issuing the command are released. The I/O areas, the getMain areas, and the chained linkage section areas remain. All existing locks and queues also remain in effect. But with link, the program storage is also saved, since the transaction expects to return and use it. What are some of the information available in the Execute Interface Block, EIB, area? The cursor position in the map, trans ID, terminal ID, task number, length of the communication area, current date and time, attention identifier, etc. What is the function of the handle condition command? The handle condition command is used to specify the program or paragraph label, to which the control has to be passed if the exception occurs. What happens when a CICS command contains the no handle option? No action is going to be taken for an exceptional condition, occurring during the execution of this command. The abnormal condition that has occurred will be ignored even if a handle condition command exists. It has the same effect as the ignore command except that it will not cancel the previous handle condition for any other command. What happens when a CICS command contains a RESP option? When the abnormal condition occurs, the CICS response code will be stored in the program work area, and can be checked at the next sequential instruction. However, no action is taken for any exceptional conditions, occurring during the execution of the command. If an application uses a handle aid enter main logic, and the handle condition error, abort routine, commands. If the program issues a receive map and fail condition occurs, which process will take control, main, logic or abort RTN? Main logic will receive control because handle aid has priority over handle condition. What is the difference between the into and set options in the receive map command? The into option moves the information in the terminal I/O area into the reserved specified area, while the set option simply returns the address of the terminal I/O area to the specified BLL cell or address of a linkage section. What is the function of the basic mapping support, BMS? BMS allows the application to be device and format independent. It translates the formatted data stream, thus enabling the application to reference data by symbolic labels. What are the mapset, map and field definition macros? The following are the macros. DFHMSD. Macro defines a mapset. DFHMDI. Macro defines a map within the mapset, defined by a previous DFHMSD macro. DFHMDF. Macro defines a field within a map, defined by the previous DFHMDI macro. What is static cursor positioning? When defining the map field using DFHMDF macro in the attribute parameter if IC is coded, the cursor will be positioned in that field. This method of cursor positioning is called static cursor positioning. What is a skipper field? When defining a field using DFHMDF macro, if you specify in the attrib option ASCII, the cursor will skip to the next unprotected field.
Let's get started with VSAM interview questions and answers.
The term VSAM stands for Virtual Storage Access Method. In the early 1970s, Virtual Storage Access Method, VSAM, was introduced by IBM. As a collection of 3 data set organizations, that is, sequential, indexed, and direct access. These organizations are combined with access method software and utilities used on IBM Mainframe. VSAM is a method used to move data between disk and main storage, and it operates in virtual environment. VSAM applies to both a file type and the access method used to manage various user files. As an access method, VSAM provides much more complex functions than other data access methods. VSAM keeps disk records in a unique format that is not understandable by other access methods. VSAM data sets are held in control intervals, CI, and control areas, CA. The size of the CI and CA is normally determined by the access method, and the way in which they are used is not visible to the user. Virtual Storage Access Method can be found on almost every mainframe out there, and yet, in some cases it is hardly used. But, in other cases, there are full-featured mission-critical applications based on VSAM. Now, let's get started with Top 20 VSAM interview questions. What is a cluster? A cluster is the combination of the index, sequence set, and data portions of the dataset. The operating system gives program access to the cluster, that is, to all parts of the dataset simultaneously. In the following example, you have a KSDS VSAM cluster with data and index portions. The data and index components are highlighted in red and green color. What is the index set? Index set is the other part of the index. It has multiple levels with pointers that ultimately reach to the sequence set. What are the distinctive features of a key sequence dataset, KSDS? The index and the distributed free space. Control interval, CI, and control area, CA, splits upon updates. Record length may be changed during update. The records are accessed by a particular key. What is a catalog? A catalog describes data set attributes and indicates the volumes on which a data set is located. It contains the names of all datasets, VSAM and non-VSAM. It is used to access these datasets. What is an alternate index? An AIX is a file that allows access to a VSAM dataset by a key other than the primary one. The alternate key pointer pair records are stored in an index cluster. This index cluster is known as alternate index, AIX. The alternate key pointer pair records are loaded into the alternate index cluster by the build index command. alternate index can be built over a KSDS and ESDS, but not over an RRDS. What could be the maximum number of the alternate index per base cluster? There can be a maximum of 253 alternate index per base cluster. It is not advisable to have more than 5 alternate index per base cluster because of an additional overhead during updates and retrievals. Can we access records in VSAM only by a single key, that is, a primary key? It is also possible to access the records in a sequence other than that of the primary key. Such keys are called alternate keys, and they can be non-unique. For example, in a HR payroll system where employee number is the unique primary key, and the employee name as alternate key. What is a path? A path is a file that allows you to access a file by alternate index. The path provides an association between the AIX and the base cluster. What is the upgrade set? The upgrade set is the list of all alternate indexes that VSAM must maintain for a specific base cluster, so that when data in the base cluster is updated, the AIX files are also updated. What is free space? Free space is reserved within the data component of a KSDS to accommodate inserting new records. What is IDCAMS? And what is the purpose of it? IDCAMS is also known as Access Method Services. It is used to perform the following task. Create a VSAM dataset, VSAM alternate index, or catalog. List a catalog entry for a dataset or catalog contents. Copy a dataset or catalog. Convert non-VSAM to VSAM dataset. Load a VSAM dataset from VSAM records. Rename the VSAM datasets. What will happen if there is no secondary allocation made for datasets? VSAM will inform the COBOL program of the problem and terminate the processing of the program. Do primary and alternate key values have to be unique? Primary key values must be unique. However, an alternate key values need not be. In the COBOL select statement, what is the organization for a KSDS? In the COBOL program, the organization is indexed. In the COBOL select statement for a KSDS, what are the 3 possibilities for access? In the COBOL program, access can be sequential, random, or dynamic. What is the COBOL record key clause? The record key in the select clause identifies the file's primary key, as it will be known to the program. What is the purpose of the file status clause in the select statement? The file status field identifies the field that VSAM uses to provide information about each I/O operation for the file. If you wish to use the rewrite command, then how must the VSAM file be opened? It must be opened I/O mode. Explain the meaning and syntax for the start command. The start command is used to read, other than the next VSAM record. A value must be moved into the record key. The key clause is optional, but it can be used to specify a relational operator, that is, equal, less than, etc. What are the different types of VSAM datasets? The following are the different category of VSAM datasets. Entry sequence datasets, ESDS. Key sequence datasets, KSDS. Relative record dataset, RRDS. Linear dataset, LDS. Why do VSAM take more disk space than other utilities? VSAM increases the disk space requirements of systems. This is because VSAM offers certain capabilities like partial self-reorganization to make things more efficient in datasets. What are the distinctive features of a KSDS, key sequence dataset? The index and the distributed free space. Control interval, CI, and control area, CA, splits upon updates. Record length may be changed during update. The records are accessed by a particular key. How are records stored in an entry sequence dataset, ESDS? In entry sequence dataset, ESDS, the records are stored in the order in which they were entered. VSAM entry sequence data sets are equivalent to QSAM sequential files. The order of the records is fixed. What's a LDS, linear data set, and what's it used for? LDS is a VSAM dataset in name only. It has unstructured fixed-size CIS, that is, 4096 bytes, which do not contain control fields. There is no free space and no access from COBOL. LDS is essentially a table of data maintained on disk. The table entries must be created via a user program and can only be logically accessed via a user program. When passed, the entire LDS must be mapped into storage, then data is accessed via base and displacement type processing. In ESDS, do we have the facility of accessing the records randomly? Yes, random access of records is possible. Records, however, cannot be deleted. We can do it by referring the RBA, relative byte address. Why is the space is kept in data component of the KSDS dataset? Free space specified during the allocation of the KSDS is left at regular intervals during the initial load of the dataset. This space helps keep the data component in physical sequence in spite of random insertions. What are the distinctive features of a KSDS, key sequence dataset? The index and the distributed free space. Control interval, CI, and control area, CA, splits upon updates. Record length may be changed during update. The records are accessed by a particular key. What is the difference between the ESDS and KSDS? ESDS doesn't have embedded free space. The keys parameter has no meaning in the context of ESDS. ESDS has no index component. An additional parameter, non-indexed, is used to tell AMS that an ESDS is being allocated. How is LDS different from ESDS? An LDS is a data set, very similar to an ESDS without the control information. It has no records, and used for fast random access. It takes advantages of the computer's very fast paging hardware for retrieval and storage. The bytes are implicitly divided into 4K blocks or pages, and the paging hardware reads and writes blocks from disk. There is no free space, unused space, control field in LDS. What is a control interval, CI? A control interval is the unit of information that VSAM transfers between virtual and auxiliary storage. What is control interval split? A new record stored in same CI, only if there is enough space. If not, then VSAM locates the free CI within the same CA, moves approximately half of the records to next CI, and stores the new record at the correct position. This is called control interval split. Whenever CI split occurs, the sequence set is updated. What is a VSAM split? If there isn't enough space in the control interval, VSAM performs a control interval split by moving some records to the free control intervals. If there isn't a free control interval, VSAM performs a control area split by allocating a new control area and moving half of the control intervals to it. Why CI and CA splits are not possible in ESDS and RRDS? In ESDS, the new record is added at the end of last record, and no embedded free space is allocated at the time of dataset definition. In the case of RRDS, the slots for the records are pre-allocated, and so the CI and CA split is not possible. What is the verify command in the VSAM files? This command is used to close those files that are kept open after the abnormal termination of the file. It also brings the index component in sync with the data components and updates the catalog. Can AIX be defined over an ESDS, which does not have any key? Although an ESDS does not have a primary key, an AIX can be defined over an ESDS. In the case of an ESDS, it is the relative byte address of the corresponding record in the base cluster that is stored. What is recovery and speed parameters in define cluster command? Recovery, default, and speed are mutually exclusive. Recovery pre-formats the control areas during the initial dataset load. If the job fails, you can restart, but you must have a recovery routine already written to restart the job. Speed does not pre-format the CAs. It is recommended that you specify speed to speed up your initial data load. Is it slower if you access a record through alternative index as compared to primary index? Yes. Because the alternate key would first locate the primary key, which in turn locates the actual record. Needs twice the number of IOs.
Let's get started with DB2 Interview Questions and Answers.
DB2 for ZOS is a relational database management system that runs on the mainframe. It is a cross-platform database system developed by IBM. In 1983, DB2 for version 1 was announced, and it became generally available on April 2, 1985. A relational database is a database in which all of the data is logically contained in tables. These databases are organized according to the relational model. DB2 has changed a lot over the past few years with significant growth in the applications and in the size of the data. Now, let's get started with top 10 DB2 interview questions with answers. How do you leave the cursor open after issuing a commit? A cursor, which is declared with hold, does not close after a commit operation. A cursor that is not declared with hold is automatically closed after a commit operation. After a commit operation, a held cursor is positioned after the last row retrieved and before the next logical row of the result table to be returned. What is a scrollable and non-scrollable cursor? When you declare a cursor, you tell DB2 whether you want the cursor to be scrollable or non-scrollable by including or omitting the scroll clause. This clause determines whether the cursor moves sequentially forward through the dataset or has random access to the dataset. The simplest type of cursor is a non-scrollable cursor, which always moves sequentially forward in the result table. When a cursor is opened, it is positioned before the first row in the result table. When the first fetch is executed, the cursor is positioned on the first row. The next fetch statement moves the cursor one row ahead for each fetch. Scrollable cursors allow for movement to any row in the result table. DB2 uses declared temporary tables for processing scrollable cursors. The declaration for a scrollable cursor has the following form. What are package and plan in DB2? A DBRM can be bound in a package or directly into a plan. Also, packages can be bound into logical groups called collections, which can then be bound into a plan. Packages are database objects that contain executable forms of SQL statements. These packages contain statements that are contained in a DB2 application. A package corresponds to a program source module. Packages and their descriptions are stored in the DB2 catalog and directory tables. A plan is an executable module containing the access path logic produced by the DB2 optimizer. It can be composed of one or more packages. What is a DBRM? DBRM stands for Database Request Module. A DBRM is nothing more than a module containing SQL statements extracted from a source program by the DB2 precompiler. It is stored as a member of a partition dataset (PDS). The DBRM itself is not stored in the DB2 catalog or DB2 directory. What is explain? The explain statement obtains information about access path selection for an explainable statement. A statement is explainable if it is a select, merge, or insert statement, or the searched form of an update or delete statement. It can be used in SPOOFY for single SQL statement or in bind step for embedded SQL. The following example illustrates an explain command. What is a trigger in DB2? In layman's term, a trigger is a piece of code executed in response to data modification operation. That is, an insert, update, or delete driven by an insert, update, delete, or merge SQL statement. A trigger cannot be directly called or executed. It is automatically executed by DB2 as the result of an action, a data modification to the associated table. What is dynamic SQL statement? Dynamic SQL is coded and embedded into an application program differently than static SQL. Instead of hard coding, the SQL is built within the program, on the fly as it executes. When built, the dynamic SQL statement must be compiled using the prepare statement. Alternatively, an implicit prepare is issued behind the scenes when implementing the execute immediate flavor of dynamic SQL. Dynamic SQL can offer advantages over static SQL when it is used appropriately. How can you quickly find out the number of rows updated after an update statement? The SQLCA variable SQL ERRD3 indicates how many rows were affected by the last insert, update, or delete statement. What is precompile and bind command? The precompile command process an application program source file containing embedded SQL statements. A modified source file is produced containing host language calls for the SQL statements. By default, a package is created in the database. The bind command invokes the bind utility, which prepares SQL statements stored in the bind file, generated by the precompiler, and creates a package that is stored in the database. What is runstats command? The runstats command updates statistics in the system catalog about the characteristics of a table, associated indexes, or statistical views. These characteristics include number of records, number of pages, and average record length. The optimizer uses these statistics to determine access paths to the data. What is the initialize verb in COBOL? And what is the difference between COBOL initialize and COBOL move space statement? Initialize verb in COBOL is used to initialize the variables with the default value, that is, space or zeros. An initialize statement is functionally equivalent to one or more move statements. Generally, the COBOL initialize statement is used to initialize all the group data items without any hassle. However, it is unproductive to initialize an entire group, unless you require all the items in the group to be initialized. In COBOL, alphabetic, alphanumeric fields, and alphanumeric edited variables are set to spaces. However, numeric edited items are set to 0. Finally, the filler occurs depending on items left intact. What is the difference between levels 66, 77, and 88, and what are they used for? Levels 66, 77, and 88 are functionally different and are used for different purposes. Level 66 is a rename clause and is used for rename items. Level 77 is an elementary level item. It cannot have group items. Level 88 is used to specify the condition name. What is the difference between index and subscript in COBOL? The subscript and index in COBOL are used to access elements from the array. The subscript in COBOL refers to the array occurrence. However, an index in COBOL is the displacement of an item from the beginning of the array. An index in COBOL can only be changed by using COBOL perform statement, COBOL search, and set statement. You must always use an index for a table to use COBOL search or COBOL search all statements. What is the difference between COBOL search and search all statement? The COBOL search and COBOL search all statement are used to search data within the array. COBOL search is a serial search. However, COBOL search all is a binary search, and it is faster and efficient as compared to search. The data in table/array should be sorted either in ascending or descending before using COBOL search all. What should be the sorting order for COBOL search all statement? The data in the COBOL array should be sorted in a specific sequence. That is, either ascending or descending. The default data sorting order is ascending. If you need to search the data in descending order, you must use descending key clause while declaring the array. What is the basic difference between performing a section and a paragraph in COBOL? The COBOL perform statement is used to execute a business logic defined in the paragraph or section. Performing a section means executing a group of paragraphs within the section. However, performing a paragraph means executing a particular paragraph logic. What is the COBOL evaluate statement, and why it is recommended over the COBOL if else statement? The COBOL evaluate statement is like a case statement and can be used instead of nested if statements. COBOL evaluate clause is better than nested ifs in terms of performance. It saves a lot of CPU and simplifies the program logic. It is not possible to replace all nested ifs in the program. But you should try to replace as much as you can. You can use the evaluate statement instead of a series of nested if statements to test several conditions and specify a different action for each. It is always recommended to use COBOL evaluate instead of nested ifs. What is the difference between COBOL continue statement and COBOL next sentence statement? In general, both the COBOL continue statement and COBOL next sentence are used to transfer control to the next executable statement. But there is a difference in the way control is transferred. The next sentence transfer control to the next executable statement after a period that is dot. But the continue statement transfer control after the explicit scope terminator that is end if, and evaluate, etc. Is it possible to redefine an x of 50 with a field of x of 100? Yes, it is possible. COBOL redefine statement is used to define the same field in two or more ways. It means that definition and the redefinition of both fields refer same storage. What is the difference between comp and comp3? And how is sign stored in comp3 fields? Both comp and comp3 in COBOL are used to define the storage format of numerical fields. Comp in COBOL represents the binary format, while comp3 in COBOL represents the packed decimal format. In comp3 the sign is stored in the last nibble. For example, if your number is plus 100, then system will stores hex 0c in the last byte. Thanks for watching this video. Please do share your feedback and hit like button. Do visit our channel for more such tutorial videos on COBOL, CICS, JCL, VSAM, IBM Mainframe and Microsoft Azure.